Interested in this issue, Chair Sullivan?
Good afternoon and welcome to the Senate Energy and Environment Committee. Today's date is February 8th and the time is 1:05. Appreciate everyone being here today. I have quite a full room. I want to open us, I'm gonna open up a public hearing on Senate Bill 1596. And while you read that, I'm gonna go down and ask that.
Go sit down. I will tell them to go.
Sorry, I'm so sorry.
Along with, on this first panel, we'll have Senator Solomon, Senator Thatcher, and our Attorney General.
And then,
Pardon?
oh, chair. Okay. Okay.
Just you.
We'll fetch you one.
Yeah.
One more chair.
Madam Attorney, we'll get you a chair in 1 second. She's got it. She's got it. Thank you.
Wait my turn, but thank you. So,
Welcome. Senator Solomon, would you like to go first?
Madam Chair and committee members, Senate Bill 1596, there's a dash 12 amendment, is most recent amendment posted on OLIS, which incorporates the 7, 9, and 10 that were posted previously. There's a no revenue and a fiscal statement issued on that amendment. It replaces the measure but maintains the majority of the act with the exception of a few pieces that are outlined on the staff measure summary. Can review those, or if you want to just jump in.
Let's review them.
Okay,
Get
so
everybody to know what we're talking about.
the dash 12 removes the requirement that a manufacturer make certain parts to disable and reset any electronic security devices available. It clarifies the act does not require a manufacturer to make anything available that would disable or override without an owner's authorization. Any privacy measures set by an owner. Stipulates the act does not require a manufacturer to provide any part the manufacturer no longer makes. Stipulates the requirements do not apply to electric toothbrushes. Clarifies that Attorney General action is in response to consumer complaint. Clarifies that any trade secret information obtained by the AG is confidential and not subject to disclosure. Requires the AG to deposit proceeds from civil penalties to the Department of Justice Protection and Education revolving account, and requires the AG to submit a report to the interim committee concerned with consumer protection, and prohibits the AG from executing and causing investigative demand to be served on a manufacturer if the AG determines that a manufacturer has or controls information relevant to the investigation of violation requirements. So that would be after July 1, 2027, rather than July 1, 2026 in the previous measure.
Thank you, Beth. Senator Solomon.
Thank you. Vice Chair Finley, members of the committee, for the record, I'm Janine Solomon. I'm the state senator for Senate District 15, which includes areas of Forest Grove, Cornelius, Hillsborough, and the Rock Creek area of Washington County. And I'm really happy to be here with you today. So I'm going to ask my colleagues, do you believe in right to repair? Do you fundamentally believe that if you own a product, you should have the freedom of choice of to where and how that is repaired? That is exactly what this bill is about. Freedom of choice for consumers and their rights. Right to Repair 1586 talks about saving Oregonians money, supporting Oregon small business, reducing e-waste, cutting pollution, and closing the digital divide. The bill before us today is a very different bill than last year's bill, Senate Bill 542. But I can look you all in the eyes and I can tell you it keeps consumer choice and rights intact. There have been many conversations with advocates, manufacturers, business organizations about the bill before you today. Through all that work, I listened and I considered and I even amended many things that were requested. As mentioned in Tuesday's hearing, that the final request from Apple was regarding parts pairing. In order for this to remain everyone operating in the same lane on this policy, I will reiterate that we have to have some form of parts pairing in this bill because removing it is not an option. And I have been very clear with Apple that I have requested this for months to address this with language, but all I have heard from them is remove the bill. In fact, one of the documents I have is about a red line version of Senate Bill 542, where it talks about parts pairing as I described it on Tuesday, very different from today's parts pairing language. But in that language, it's just struck. That's what they want to make sure that that is struck. And they have even reviewed today's language and have asked for that to be removed. So companies that are in support, I am proud to say Google, Technology Association of Oregon, which is representing local and national tech companies from two-man shop or two-woman shop to large business companies internationally and here in Oregon. They will be submitting written testimony after this hearing, but also 89 small businesses have declared their support from every county across every corner of the state. Companies that are neutral, OBI, Intel, Amazon, Amazon Web Services, and Microsoft. How incredible is it that I have pushed and pushed for public meetings and asked Apple to come to this table, and they are here today. So I'm very, very much looking forward to asking questions, just as many of you will ask your questions and have the opportunity to do so in person. I want to talk about the repair process. Nothing in this bill requires a company to provide manuals, tools, or parts if they don't already have a process in place to diagnose, maintain, and repair consumer electronic equipment. Whether that is coming in the future, obviously they will have to take part in this, or if they currently don't have if they must already have that plan, meaning that they take your equipment, they diagnose it, they tell you what's wrong with it, they repair it, and they return that same equipment back to you. That's what's included in this bill. We're not asking people to go back and recreate things that aren't already out there through their own private company repair process that they have, or with an authorized dealer. From that work, I just want to make sure that I make this really clear, and I want to get some statements on the record. So with the passage of this bill, the original equipment manufacturers, the OEMs, will have to offer some repair opportunities to consumers or independent repair providers, that they offer their own in-house or authorized repair programs. And with this, there is a very clear, definitive expectation of the beneficiaries of these documents, tools or parts, to use them responsibly and in the manner that they were intended. It is important to understand and respect the laws of intellectual property as well. It would also be great to make sure that we could have our business partners provide some education for these beneficiaries so they can fully understand their responsibilities in using these items for repair. And when we get this passed, it is such a win for consumers, which is why we want to choose to focus on consumer electronic equipment. And I can give you the commitment that any policy that I work on in the future, it's how I roll. I would repeat the process and I would bring everyone to the table. Another company asked me to mention that this bill does not apply to vehicles, and that is expressly stated in section 13FC. And I want to put on the record that the term equipment in that section is intended to be inclusive of consumer-owned vehicle charging equipment. Colleagues, before you is the most comprehensive, consumer-driven policy, thoughtfully crafted with many minds put together to save Oregonians money, to support Oregon small businesses, and to provide protections for our environment and our resources. So before you today is a bill that I'm incredibly proud of because of this collaboration, the openness, and while we kept the focus on consumers. So I ask you again, colleagues, do you believe in right to repair? And I appreciate your time today.
For the record, my name is Kim Thatcher. I'm a state senator. I represent District 11, and I am pleased to sit next to my colleague, Senator Janine Sulman, in support of this bill before you today, Senate Bill 1596. Now, you had to have been living under a rock to not know how hard she has worked on this bill during, I don't know, I think last session, maybe before, I don't know, maybe before it came to the building with that. But anyway, she has done a lot to bring the parties together and listen to their concerns. And I loved the concept. I couldn't support it last time. I appreciate what she has done to listen to the concerns of businesses and strengthening both intellectual property and also privacy protections. So I really wholeheartedly. I do support it. And I want to thank the people that are in the business of repairing for advocating for consumer rights, because that's really the biggest part for me. It is about consumer rights. I want the people, not the wonderful corporations that bring us these items that we all carry around in our pockets and or put in our homes. But I want to have people have the control over their own property, right? Every Oregonian should be able to fix their own property and decide how to do it themselves, or maybe do it themselves or bring it to a trusted friend, family member. Maybe there's a business down the road from them that's an independent, or maybe they have to travel a little further and they may choose to go to an authorized repair shop. But whatever they choose, it is their right. And for most Oregonians, especially now in this economy, saving money is a huge deal. And wherever that can happen, we want to help facilitate that. People can't necessarily afford to shell out money for the protection plans or to go to the authorized shops for expensive repairs. Maybe it's an older device, whatever. Fortunately, the internet has a lot of resources. I repaired my dryer on via YouTube, but anyway, twice. I just want to say this for the record. But people are able to get the parts, the tools, and instructions. Well, we want to make sure they can. There's all this information out there how to do, but we want to just give people choices. For some people, they might not want to repair their own dryer. But finally, in my district, and I'm sure all of your districts as well, we have small businesses. We're a small business state. And many of the people that are in my district are, well, not many, but there's about at least 20 repair shops that reside within the district or serve the area. And some are authorized dealers or authorized repair shops, and some are the independent shops. And I just want to give people that choice so they can shop around and get the best deal for them and decide what's best for them and their families. I believe we must give Oregonians the freedom of choice of where and how to repair their own property. And that is why I'm sponsoring and co-sponsoring Senate Bill 1596.
Thank you. I know you have to go back to committee.
I do. Unless you have questions for me, which I doubt, but yeah.
Thank you so much.
Madam Attorney General.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Vice Chair Finley, members of the Senate Committee. Good afternoon. My name is Ellen Rosenblum, Oregon Attorney General. I'm here today to speak in support of Senate Bill 1596, the Right to Repair Bill. I support the bill, and we really appreciate the addition of the -12 now it's called -12 amendments that assure that enforcement by the Department of Justice is limited to consumer-driven complaints. As Oregon's AG, protecting consumers is a core responsibility and has been a central priority of my administration. The right to repair is a matter of consumer rights and consumer protection. It's also a nonpartisan issue, I hope, that impacts every consumer and small business. The bill ensures that consumers have choices as to whom, where, when, and at what cost their phones, their computers, and other appliances that are covered under the law, proposed law, can be repaired. It was not so long ago that we didn't have to affirmatively claim a right to repair things that we bought. We just repaired them. Or in my case, we hired someone to repair them. But the fact of the matter is that digital devices and other equipment are unendingly more advanced and complex today. And device manufacturers often control access to these electronic parts, making it difficult for independent repair shops to compete and for consumers to make their own repairs if they choose to do so. In 2023, I joined a bipartisan group of 28 state attorneys general urging Congress to pass federal right to repair legislation. Although there has been no federal action on this issue to date, the state attorneys general and I remain hopeful that Congress will eventually set the stage for more choice and competition when it comes to equipment repairs. In the meantime, Oregon has this opportunity with Senate Bill 1596 to protect consumers and small businesses in this space. The bill also ensures that small businesses can remain competitive and that rural and low-income consumers can obtain important repairs locally, quickly, and at an affordable price. Senate Bill 1596 will make Oregon the 4th state to pass right to repair legislation, following New York, Minnesota, and California. This bill is similar to California's right to repair bill, which takes effect on July of this year. In fact, I believe the only law that's gone into effect so far is the New York one. Our bill requires manufacturers to make diagnostic tools, information, and replacement parts available to a consumer or third-party repair provider at a fair and reasonable price. And this requirement applies whenever manufacturers make similar materials available to authorized repair providers. My team worked closely with Senator Solomon. Thank you so much, Senator, and with Osberg on this bill and amendments. And I want to thank them for their collaboration and their leadership on this important issue. And I urge your support of Senate Bill 1596. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for this panel? Senator,
Thank you.
Senator Hayden.
Thank you, Chair Finley. Momentarily.
I
Chair
like that.
Finley.
Say that again.
I have a question from a legal aspect for our Attorney General. If a phone or electronic device of some sort that contained data was seized by law enforcement, could they work with a third party to access that data where they might have currently been required to get some sort of court order, but the manufacturer is saying that this allows access to data? So let's say our law enforcement seizes or in some manner takes into evidence a laptop or a phone. Could then they work with a third party, or is there anything in this legislation that would prevent them from being the third party that says, hey, I need the keys or whatever it is to get into this phone and bypass a court order? What is your opinion on
that? Senate Vice Chair Finley, Senator Hayden, I knew I was going to get the tough question here this afternoon. And I think that that is one that I'm probably going to have to punt to somebody else who's a little bit smarter than I am. It seems to me that, of course, the smart thing to do on the part of a prosecutor in that situation who wants to make the case is going to be to go ahead and get a warrant to make sure that that's an appropriate follow on from the seizure in the first instance. So that's just as a practical matter. Ms. McCullough, Kimberly McCullough, is here today with me, and she may have some additional information if you would allow her to respond, and also the senator.
I can certainly add something. Vice Chair Finley and Senator Hayden and members, I will just say something that part of the -12 amendment does talk about the removal of that security lock language. And so on the original bill on page 3, line 45 through the next page, which is 6, really kind of talks about access to security information and talks about that it must be disabled and reset and potentially, well, upon conversation with a lot of folks, the way that was worded was very concerning to people. They were concerned that someone was going to have access to the bill or access, to information or give a security clearance. And so we removed that. So that is no longer in the bill, in the -12 amendment.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
Have
Yeah,
further
good answer.
input?
Much better than
And
mine.
we have another panel.
Follow up?
Yes.
Were we going to get more of a response directly on the law enforcement engagement? I understand that it might be always a good idea to get a court order, but would they be able to access that data that they couldn't currently?
Senator Hayden and Chair Finley, I do think Senator Solomon answered that with regard to this, with the legislation quite well. There are constitutional limitations on search and seizure. And so,
Identify.
oh,
yourself
I'm
for the
so
record.
sorry. I'm Kimberly McCullough. I'm Legislative Director for the Oregon Department of Justice. So there are constitutional limits on what law enforcement can do as far as search and seizure. And that exists regardless of whether or not law enforcement was able to get, for example, a key or something like that. We also passed legislation a number of years ago related to law enforcement essentially unlocking devices and using digital forensic devices that actually requires a warrant under all circumstances, and they can't use exigent circumstances as an excuse to sort of do that digital forensics. So we do have state statutory restrictions as well on law enforcement searches of devices.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Anything else?
Thank you both.
That it?
Yeah, I'd just like to reserve the right to ask Apple the same question if they
Okay.
testify today.
No, that would be fine.
I'm gonna remain, but
Okay.
because the next panel, in case there's other questions that
Thank
I can
you.
help with. Thank you so much. I think it's Charlie.
So I'll call the next panel. You want to start at the
It's just
top?
Charlie Fisher. Yeah.
We'll
Who
start at
else
the,
was there coming up? as
Mr.
well?
Fisher.
Was there someone else? Oh, Chris Coughlin. Chris Coughlin.
and Chris Coughlin.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for the spread.
Sorry, I left you a little unprepared.
Okay,
Appreciate it.
so who would like to go first?
Do you have anything else you want to?
Oh, I'm not going
Okay.
to add, so I'm
Great,
just
okay.
here for
Excellent.
questions.
I can go first. For the record, Charlie Fisher, State Director at OSPERG. We're a statewide public interest group representing thousands of Oregonians around the state. And Senator Hayden, I have something directly responsive to your question, my testimony, so I promise I will get to that. And here to strongly support this bill, I will submit written testimony, but I just wanted to talk briefly about kind of the principle that we try to adhere to when working on this issue, and then the process of how we got here. So the principle is pretty simple. People should be able to, as easily as possible, fix what they own and keep it going as long as possible, instead of having to buy a new product and dispose of the old. So it's good for the environment. There's a letter from, I think, 15 environmental organizations on the record in support of this bill. It's good for small businesses. There are 89 independent small businesses that support this bill. The list of them is on the record as well. This is good for consumers and the public. Chris will talk about some of kind of the polling behind this issue. And really, it's just about the concept of ownership. And that you should be able to do what you want with what you own. If you purchase a product, you should be able to do what you want with it, and you shouldn't have to go back to whoever you bought it from in order to make it work in the future. The concept of kind of tying future purchases to a previous purchase. So that's where we're coming from on this bill, and I think with all of the work that it's been done, it still holds true to those principles. So a little bit about the process. As you know, there's a lot of input on this bill last session. It ended up different than it started, 542, and from the first day of the interim till today, I really want to commend Senator Solomon for bringing together just a multitude of stakeholders from different perspectives to make sure that this bill works, and we're taking into account the feedback from the companies and industries that are going to be covered. So, and I mean that sincerely. We want to talk to anyone who has opinions on this, and are more than happy to always have conversations about that. So there are four main things that we really heard were concerns: security, intellectual property, safety, and liability. So first, security, to your point, Senator. So in addition to removing that section about the security provisions, there's also a new provision that came from California that explicitly says that manufacturers are not required to provide, and this is on page 7, lines 3 through 7 on the -12, not required to provide anything that would override an anti-theft or privacy security measure. So I think to your point, to the extent that law enforcement was attempting to override a privacy measure or security measure on the phone, the bill explicitly says that they're not required to do so. So that's security. Intellectual property, there's language that was taken from California to strengthen intellectual property protections. Safety, I think one of the worries was about putting non-OEM parts into a device and maybe not knowing what the quality of those were. There's an addition that independent repair companies have to provide notice ahead of time if they're what kind of part they're going to put in a device. And I'll note that what isn't in California, but I think adds an extra layer of protection, is the fact that independent repair companies have to have certification before availing themselves of what right to repair requires. And then finally is liability. And so what I mean by that is kind of the enforcement. So, private right of action was the enforcement in the last session. And as you can probably intuit from previous panel, Attorney General is now the sole enforcement agency for this bill. So I won't take up any more of your time. I really appreciate the work that Senator Solomon has done and so many others have, and urge your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Connor.
Thank you, Vice Chair Finley, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Chris Coughlin. I'm the policy director with Oregon Consumer Justice. And Oregon Consumer Justice uses community engagement, policy, and the law to strengthen consumer protection across our state. And I'm here today in support of the bill, but Senator Solomon asked if I would share some research that we did. And so Oregon Consumer Justice partners with the Oregon Values and Beliefs Center to do regular surveys every 6 months on a range of consumer justice and consumer rights issues in Oregon. And in the October survey, we asked a question about the right to repair legislation. And I'm just here today the memo's on the record, so it's in OLIS, so you can see all of the details. But a strong majority of Oregonians support enacting right to repair legislation. In fact, 70% of Oregonians support legislation requiring technology and equipment manufacturers to make parts, tools, and documents publicly available so consumers can repair products from these manufacturers. Of the remaining 30% of Oregonians, I just want to note 10% oppose the legislation, and the remainder 20% just aren't sure how they feel about it. So again, very strong support across the state. But even more importantly to me, as we work as a statewide organization, is that every subgroup that was examined supports this type of legislation at a rate of 50% or higher. So, too many of your conversations here in this building, and all of us, we talk about kind of an urban-rural divide often when we're discussing legislation. We do not see that urban-rural divide when we're looking at the polling of Oregonians on wanting the right to be able to repair the products that they own. In fact, 65% of urban Oregonians and 67% of rural Oregonians support the legislation respectively. And the way that Oregon Values and Beliefs divides the state is it's self-reported, it's urban, rural, and then people living in areas described as rural changing to suburban and suburban. So again, broad support across. There's also support is especially high among 55 to 64-year-olds at 83% and 65 to 70-year-olds at 82%. And so again, just want to say, and then finally, as far as political affiliation, about 2/3 of Republicans at 65% and independent and non-affiliated voters at 66% support the legislation, alongside 81% of Democrats. So again, strong support if you break down any demographic. And so just wanted to share that. And again, the methodology and so forth is in the memo on OLIS.
Thank you. Any questions for this panel? Okay, thank you.
I'll be right up.
So while Senator Solomon's coming up, I'll call the next panel. Dustin Brighton and Walter Alcorn. And how about Ashley Sutton? They're on.
Walter Alcorn's here.
Okay.
Yeah, hi.
Mr. Alcorn, go right ahead, sir.
Thank you very much. Walter Alcorn, I'm with the Consumer Technology Association. Appreciate the opportunity to provide a few comments here. We represent, as our name sounds like, consumer technology companies, including manufacturers of devices that are the target of this legislation. First, thank you very much to Senator Solomon for meeting with us and engaging on our concerns, and also for deleting the security lock override provision. That's helpful. We do have several critical remaining concerns about unintended consequences, and I want to specify those very quickly. First of all, on the parts pairing prohibition, we do request that be deleted because we're concerned about the combination of the parts pairing prohibition and other provisions of the law will inadvertently enable the market, not just for non-OEM parts, but also for counterfeit parts. As a different industry that's been raised, cars, independent parts for cars of varying quality are to be expected in used cars, but not so for digital devices like smartphones. And this really will change the market for any person that's going to be acquiring a used smartphone in the future, which is, I think, something that should be weighed. We also have concerns about the retroactivity, particularly for non-smartphone devices back to 2015, and we continue to have serious doubts about the legality of the retro application of such a provision. Third, we are concerned about the equating of internally performed repairs with authorized repairs. We remain concerned this is going to disincentivize manufacturers from doing any post-warranty repairs, especially for specialty electronics and for lower value products where manufacturers have provided such repairs really as a courtesy to their customers. So we don't want to have the unintended consequence of reducing repair options for consumers who live in states that include a provision like this in their law. We also, two more, we would really prefer most favorable to be the standard for parts instead of we're replacing the most favorable requirement for parts with reasonable cost and terms. This is all in written testimony that's provided to the committee. We really think that's going to be much more reasonable and would take care of any doomsday scenarios that we could think of anyway. And then finally, we would like to remove the allocation limitation reference. The language in the bill is broader than concerns that we've heard about malicious activities and would still result in the unintended consequences detailed in our written testimony. And we do suggest an alternative to address that scenario. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify today and look forward to continue to working with you on solutions here.
Thank you. Senator Golden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sir, I think I missed the reasoning of one of your points there. Maybe you could help me. I think I heard you say this bill would have the impact of reducing repair options. And of course, there's a lot of interest behind this bill in the belief that it will in fact increase repair options. So you went over it a little fast and I don't quite follow the logic.
Yes, here's the unintended consequence. You know, the fight on this bill has generally been at the high end of the market, but there are a lot of electronics manufacturers that aren't at the high end of the market. There are also especially a lot of electronics manufacturers, and a lot of these companies do not have authorized third-party repair providers. They just do repairs internally. So this actually would equate those internal repair companies with those companies that have authorized repair providers. The problem with that is, you know, if you're doing repairs internally, you're not necessarily packaging those spare parts for external distribution. You don't need a SKU. There are a lot of things that come with the external distribution of parts, and this would require manufacturers that are doing internal repairs to enable any independent repair provider who asks to do those repairs, and their systems aren't set up to do that. So to avoid that hassle, they would just stop doing repairs, at least for customers in a state that had this provision.
Quick follow-up. Yeah. And I think you're assuming that there'd be no other manufacturers interested in filling that void with parts for these. Are you saying basically it would be more difficult to find necessary parts and nobody would be interested in filling the void if the manufacturer doesn't provide the parts?
Well, it could be that. Frankly, I think it depends on the product. I mean, because a lot of these are products where there's not a big market, there's not a lot of money to be made in the repair. And so, you know, the manufacturer providing the repair service as a courtesy would be disincentivized by this. And again, a lot of this is not looking at the high end of the market, but sort of the broad, middle, and lower end of the market.
I guess that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I've got a question.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. I'm trying to understand the scenario. My understanding is that many of these repair shops just want to take parts from a damaged phone, let's talk about the phones, and use the parts that are good to put it on an older phone to make sure that we're recycling and also fixing at a lower cost. Do you support that as a concept?
Yes.
Okay.
We do.
And then my understanding further is that your concern is that either you don't want counterfeit parts to get into that stream and you don't, is that a true statement?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And does this bill, and then one of the ways that you make sure that you don't have counterfeit parts is parts pairing. You pair the parts together to make sure that the used screen can work on the old phone.
Yes, that's, I guess, the way at least some companies are starting to do it or trying.
And as you read this language right now, would it forbid a company from doing that, from pairing those parts? And just making sure that this is a real, screen goes with this phone?
Well, I guess the question is, are we going to permanently inhibit the use of counterfeit parts? And I do worry that the way that the language is written, that it could result in that. But frankly, I think the company that's most familiar with this is going to be testifying later. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And they could probably address that better than I.
But do you have other manufacturers that you represent a whole broad
I do.
manufacturing company? Okay. Do you have other manufacturers that are struggling with parts pairing besides a major phone company?
I understand there are other companies that are doing parts pairing, but it's a new concept. It's a new way of approaching this. So, but it is a concern. Anything that would basically inhibit the ability to keep counterfeit parts out of devices generally would raise concerns for us.
But that's why you're parts pairing, in order to make sure that it's
Right.
not a counterfeit. This bill doesn't prevent you from doing that. Yes or no?
I believe it actually would. The way that it's written, because there are three provisions, correct, that, and I don't have it pulled up in front of me, that prohibit parts pairing. And if you look at those three, effectively it would allow, or if you will, enable the use of counterfeit parts.
Okay. If you named, 4 different sections that you would like changed, I think? Would,
Yes.
if those were changed, could you get to support of this bill?
Yes, we could.
All right. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I have a couple of questions for you. This is Janine. So would Apple be considered an in-house, the Apple Store, would it be considered an in-house repair?
I guess it depends. The way that it's written currently, probably yes. But frankly, that's not the intent of my comment. Again, I'm looking not at consider Apple towards the high end of the market. Hopefully they're not offended with me saying that. But I'm thinking about the other one.
And then can you tell me, in the parts pairing that you're familiar with in a product, is every single part in that have parts pairing? Or are there some things that can be fixed without parts pairing?
Yeah, I think it's an evolving strategy, I would say. And, hopefully we can, as an industry, work out ways that we could remove the, at least potential for counterfeit parts and still, frankly, educate consumers, which I know that part of it is in the proposal, is in the bill.
Yeah. Okay. And can you tell me, are there parts available online that people can go to, and if they want to fix their own phone currently, that they could go to and order a part? I'm not saying specifically from a manufacturer, just like partsrus.com, which I hope is not a real. I'm just wondering, is that out there that they can already do that?
Yes, iFixit has a good number of parts that you can purchase through them, and not to plug one company, but I just did.
Well,
and
yeah, maybe specifically a consumer company that folks can order from, whether it's a store, a big box store, or whether it's an Amazon type, could they go on and order parts?
I believe there are, and frankly, I have not done this myself, but my understanding is that there are many, many such places available on Amazon and other online marketplaces.
That can order parts. And do you know if all of
Yes.
those parts that are being sold, are they original OEM parts, or are they potentially other parts that are a third party or?
I think they're a mix. I'm a little more familiar with replacement batteries and the concern associated with putting the wrong battery into a device and basically the bad consequences associated with that. But I'm sure it's the case that there are other parts and components that are non-OEM and sometimes counterfeit too.
Okay, so thank you. So just to recap, you're concerned about counterfeit parts specific to this bill, but currently parts are available online that people could access that aren't OEM parts.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct. And in many cases, at least that I'm aware of. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you for that clarification. Did you have?
No.
Okay. No, I don't see any other questions. Thank you so much for being here. I think we
Thank you.
had, did Ashley? Or are you, because you're both from the same organization, are you both?
Well, actually, Ashley's from TechNet, but I mean, I think we
Oh,
are
sorry.
coordinating, so I don't know if Ashley. That's okay.
Is Ashley online? I see an Ashley.
No, that's our.
Yep, I'm here and I apologize. I'm having connectivity issues today, so I'm not able to appear
Yeah,
on camera,
no
but
worries.
to go.
No worries. Yeah, no worries.
Chair,
Yeah.
Vice Chair
Yeah.
Finley and esteemed members of the committee, for the record, I'm Ashley Sutton, Executive Director at TechNet for Washington and the Northwest, testifying in respectful opposition to Senate Bill 1596. TechNet is a national nonpartisan association representing the ecosystem of tech companies. While we have members on both sides of the issue, we oppose the bill due to the outstanding concerns with the language. We have worked jointly with another industry group to develop a model repair bill and have shared those requested changes with the sponsor. Right to Repair is meant to provide parity between authorized OEM networks and independent shops and to protect consumers. Again, we have members on both sides of the specific issue, but I do want to note concerns with the parts pairing provision, which would require companies not just to provide equal access, but to deviate from their repair practices. This process is used to verify the authenticity of the parts being used in a device, which the bill acknowledges is an important concept. For example, Section 3 requires independent repairs to disclose information about whether parts are genuine to consumers. We also have concerns with the retroactivity language dating back to 2015 for parts nearly a decade old, as we represent companies beyond personal phone devices. Manufacturers must ensure that their supply chain contracts comply with this requirement. Forming retroactive contracts with suppliers can be challenging due to the dynamic and highly competitive nature of the supply chain. Enacting laws that require manufacturers to take action for products produced and sold before the law's enactment may face constitutional challenges. While we appreciate the prime sponsor's efforts to include cybersecurity and privacy disclosure to consumers, we remain concerned about the privacy implications of this bill as it relates to the sensitive personal data contained on devices, such as banking details, consumer health data, and intimate images. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ashley. So with that, we're going to, oh, we heard from, I'm sorry, Dustin was called. Dustin Brighton?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep, perfect. Thanks,
Okay.
Dustin.
Yeah, thank you. Chair, Mr. Chair, or Madam Chair, and members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to be here today. My name is Dustin Brighton, and I represent the Repair Done Right Coalition. The Repair Done Right Coalition is made up of companies, organizations, and people who care about ensuring that their innovative products are repaired and maintained in an authorized and protected manner. These companies have assisted in connecting consumers and governments through their products over the years. During the pandemic, products and services manufactured by these companies and organizations have been essential in ensuring commerce and personal relationships remained intact. We're opposed to Senate Bill 1596, which would mandate original equipment manufacturers of digital electronic equipment or a part of the equipment sold in Oregon to provide independent repair providers with the diagnostic repair information, softwares, tools, and parts, increasing safety, cybersecurity risks for consumers and businesses, and could possibly threaten the Oregon innovation economy. OEMs currently already offer consumers a wide range of safe and secure repair options through their authorized repair networks. Obviously, this enables manufacturers of consumer electronics and other products to stand behind the quality of those products. Most consumer technology products are comprised of complex electronics, which do require specialized training and sophisticated test instruments to repair safely. Some of these repairs can be extremely detailed, complicated, and dangerous, such as the lithium-ion batteries, which were referenced earlier. They should only be repaired by trained professionals who understand, can mitigate those hazards associated with installing, removing, or replacing these batteries. Manufacturers want to ensure that their products are serviced by professionals who understand the intricacies of their products and have spent time procuring the knowledge necessary to safely repair them and return them to consumers without compromising those standards, protecting their brands, and undermining the safety and security of their products. Consumers, businesses of all sizes, all need reasonable assurance that those they trust to repair their connected products will do so safely, securely, and correctly. State law mandating that all manufacturers must provide a how-to manual for any product and provide it to anyone who asks are questionable in our eyes. Forcing OEMs to provide unauthorized repair facilities with information on bypassing consumer safety locks presents risks which we are just not comfortable with at this time. I appreciate the efforts that have gone into this bill, and our members are committed to working with you to promote digital privacy and security. Thank you for allowing me to be here today.
Thank you, Dustin. Are there any questions? Can I just ask rather quickly, did you happen to see or read the amendment regarding the security lock information that had been taken from this bill?
We have.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I just heard you reference it, so I just want to make sure you remembered.
Yeah.
And then did you also read that we have a certification process for independent that was added that isn't in the California bill? Did you happen to?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, again, our members, and again, as I stated, I appreciate the effort that's gone into this, similar to the organization TechNet that testified before me. We've just got members that are still not comfortable with the legislation.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time to be here today.
Thank you so much.
So we are
Hey, I gather I'm going first.
Yes, please.
All right. Cool. Yeah. Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Roman Godin. I am co-owner of Hyperion Computer Works in the Garden Home neighborhood of Southwest Portland. I'm here to speak in support of Senate Bill 1596. We serve our local community by offering repairs for computers and various other electronics. We interact with an average of 100 individuals and their broken devices every month, helping them navigate the financial and logistical hurdles that accompany the pursuit of repair. One of the challenges we've always faced in our day-to-day work has been getting access to the parts and documentation we need to execute repairs for the wide variety of devices we see. Lately, a new trend has emerged that is referred to as parts pairing. Some manufacturers assign a serial number to parts and use software locks so that the part can only be used with that one specific device. If you have one iPhone with a broken screen and another that won't turn on, you would think that you could repurpose the screen from the dead phone, but it's not that simple. After replacing the screen, you won't have all the features that you used to have, and you'll get a prompt that the system can't tell whether or not the parts are genuine, even when they are. When you have your device repaired at an authorized service provider, they're running a software tool to calibrate or pair the new part. Those tools aren't available to the public or to independent repair shops, and used parts are usually not an option for consumers. Our standard practice is to provide our clients with a range of options, new and used, original and aftermarket. We also inform them of the potential consequence of their selection. This approach puts choice in the client's hands and increases our chance at being able to meet their budget. When they're available, the lower cost of used or aftermarket parts can make or break whether or not a repair fits within someone's budget. not to mention the ecological impact of being forced to discard parts that still work. The parts pairing practice stifles fair competition. When I tell somebody that they might face this or that inconvenience by having me do the repair instead of the manufacturer, they're likely to take the more certain route through the manufacturer. I've gone through the expense of marketing to reach somebody with a device for me to fix, only for the work to fall through over an arbitrary restriction. This legislation levels the playing field so that Oregonians can choose who will fix their electronics, whether that's themselves, their friendly neighborhood computer repair shop, or the manufacturer's authorized service provider. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Yeah.
I do. Yeah, hi there. Do you believe that a manufacturer should be able to have some assurances that whatever part you're putting on isn't counterfeit?
Yes, for the purposes of warranty, I can understand that, and that would make sense that they would serialize the part and have a means to keep track of that. There will come a threshold in a device's life where the manufacturer won't actually offer parts for it anymore. And when that happens, the aftermarket kind of comes in and fills in the void. The terms counterfeit and aftermarket often get conflated. I will say that specifically with batteries, manufacturers' reluctance to make parts available to everybody else has actually created this stream of imitation batteries that look really close to the real thing. It's also created an industry where there are good, genuine, high-quality aftermarket batteries available. The average consumer isn't really equipped to discern that. So when you go on Amazon, you'll find a lot of low-quality junk, and it's tough to figure out, is this battery safe? Yeah.
We have another.
No, it's okay.
Thank you so much. Can we hear from, I think I said Sam Guthman, I think joining us online remotely. Perfect.
Yes, thank you, Chair Solomon. Chair Solomon, Vice Chair Finley, and members of the committee, for the record, my name is Sam Guthman. I am the policy manager at Apano, a culturally specific organization that unites Asian and Pacific Islanders to build power, develop leaders, and advance equity through organizing, advocacy, community development, and cultural work. I'm speaking to urge the committee to pass Senate Bill 1596, the Right to Repair Bill, in support of BIPOC communities and businesses. For the record, and to be clear, I am not the sole representative of BIPOC communities, nor do I claim to be. I'm simply a perspective that I think that would benefit the community and the committee in this way. Not only does this bill provide a positive step for environmental waste reduction and reuse, but it also supports small businesses in their work to make simple fixes for everyday technology. Small businesses that are often BIPOC owned and run. Apano has a long and fruitful history of supporting BIPOC and the AA-NHPI communities and their right to be fiscally stable and healthy. This bill would further allow businesses to garner income while simultaneously reducing hazardous and often hard to dispose of environmental and electronic waste. If passed, this bill could save the average Oregonian household hundreds of dollars per year by having consumers pay significantly less to repair common technologies like their phones and computers instead of buying new ones. This is also crucial for students and work-from-home employees alike across the state that depend on the use of laptops and computers to complete their learning and work. As we saw in May 2020, at the height of the pandemic, we faced a laptop shortage, leaving thousands without means to attend their virtual classes and meetings. Senate Bill 1596 would help to close the digital divide gap by keeping computers around for longer and in turn ease the demand for new laptops. I myself also took classes in May 2020 when I was attempting further in higher education and did have to repair my computer since I could not afford to buy a whole new one just to take online classes. Once again, I asked the committee to vote yes on Senate Bill 1596, the right to repair, in order to give our small businesses, BIPOC communities, online student learners, work-from-home employees, and everyone who relies on a healthful and clean environment a better and more equitable future. Thank you for your time and consideration today.
Thank you. I don't see any questions. Thank you so much. What?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Thank you, Chair Solomon and Vice Chair Finley for hearing me today, and the rest of the committee. My name is Juan Muro. I'm the executive director at Free Geek. We are a nonprofit digital equity organization here in Portland, Oregon. Well, up in Portland, Oregon. Our vision is to include everybody in our digital future. Our mission is to sustainably reuse technology, enable digital access, and provide education to empower people to reach their potential. Each year, we collect close to 2 million pounds of e-waste and divert it from landfills. We reuse as much of the technology we collect to help us close the digital divide. Right now, it impacts about 8% of the population here in Oregon and 11% of Americans, the technology device gap. Annually, we redirect 10,000 devices and more than 14,000 other digital tools back into community. This accounts for about only 25% of the technology that we collect. According to a little bit of just education here, according to the U.S. Census and the 2018 American Community Survey and Digitally.org mapping tool, over 2,000 individuals in Oregon right now rely solely on mobile devices such as smartphones and tablets for work, education, and participation in today's digital world. In 2022, Free Geek was forced to close down its tech support bench because it was too expensive to keep open. And we struggled to find funding to help us provide this service to everyone. We stopped repairing and refurbishing most mobile devices because they became difficult to fix. In the last 2 years, we've collected and recycled close to 32,000 mobile devices. Lack of access to parts, tools, labor to repair these devices associated costs was just not sustainable for us. I want to highlight one example of how repair barriers impact our ability to repair devices and get them in the hands of people who need them most. This was highlighted in a New York Times article from November that we participated in. Despite receiving close to 15,000 donated iPhones and other devices this last year, we were only able to refurbish about 300 of them. The remaining iPhones had to be sent to be shredded and recycled. This is in large part because of the issue of parts repairing that's been mentioned before. We simply decided that for the most part, these devices were just too difficult to fix. This right here in front of you is just me sitting for an hour at our donation center and collect a device from folks that just couldn't repair them and that we just can't fix ourselves. The device gap in Oregon and across the United States continues to grow, broadening the digital divide. We believe that technology reuse is the best way to keep low to no cost technology available for the community while extending the life of devices. Free Geek can advance digital equity through technology reuse, which is why we support SB 1596. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Any questions? I don't see any questions. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. I want to call a couple of folks. I'm trying to mix up so I'm going to have joining remotely, John Merrick Russell, and then Scott Brewing. And so we'll do.
All right, John Merrick Russell, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
All right, Chairperson Solomon and Vice Chair Finley, members of the committee. My name is John Merrick Russell, for the record, John Russell. And I'd like to share one concept of my personal views on the right to repair bill verbally. As I am neutral in this bill with amendment considerations, if not in concept or form or in a work session, I personally believe users should have the ability to opt out of automatic after updates, accidental medical firmware software upgrades, and user firmware updates on one's device to roll back to preferred versions on some personal device. Or again, to revert to firmware medical recommend updated devices and have a personal smartphone device last original compatibility while moving to the future of technology and personal devices. It may need its own bill, further conversation with partners and or work sessions. However, these options in amendment considerations, conversations, and or work sessions should be provided with clear prior notice on both user and the other devices upgrades and downgrades, and with rollbacks with roll forward choices on both user and medical user professional devices and the user personal device, operating system, and device app compatibility. I remain neutral in my stance, understanding the complexity of the issues in this session, and thank you for your time. There's a big difference of this type of upgrade and certain repair things versus a phone and app considerations. Again, thank you for your time, as I know this is very complex and needs, further conversation, or it may amendment have considerations. If the committee has any questions, I would appreciate that, but I also understand that it's a very complex issue in how we communicate with each other. And if I'm in Salem, I will definitely go to your office and show you the three-part, complexity in visual form when a medical upgrade device happens, how it affects personal life and the free and determined life. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. I don't see any questions at this time, so appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Solomon, members of the committee. My name is Scott Bruin. I'm the Vice President of Government Affairs for OBI, Oregon Business Industry. Thank you for allowing me to testify today. OBI is neutral on Senate Bill 1596 and very appreciative of the significant improvements in this bill compared to Senate Bill 542 from the 2023 session. These improvements include removal of the private right of action provision and strengthening of protections for intellectual property and proprietary information. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the work you and others did to improve the bill. We know it included a lot of hours, meetings, negotiations, and compromise. For the record, OBA does want to voice an outstanding concern. The importance of intellectual property protection cannot be overstated. Millions, if not tens of millions of dollars of risk capital can go into the development of just a single product. We owe it to the people who put their time, talent, and treasure at risk with no guarantees of success or reward. We owe it to them to protect their proprietary information and intellectual property. This is so important, in fact, that it's even a major component of U.S. foreign policy in our relations with other nations. We know that here domestically, bodies of law are in place now to protect intellectual property, and that violations of those laws, whether knowingly or even accidentally, can subject the violator to significant criminal and civil penalties. In other words, these laws require conscious responsibility. It is OBI's hope and expectation that the ultimate beneficiaries of Senate Bill 1596, the independent repair providers, are fully cognizant of these responsibilities. Thank you again, Madam Chair and Committee. OBI appreciates the improvements on the bill and the opportunity to testify, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
I got a question.
Yes, please.
Scott, doesn't this bill protect trade secrets? I mean, there is a trade secret protection in the bill.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Senator Lieber, yes, there is, and we appreciate that. That's part of the reason that we got to neutral on this. I think, and Chair Solomon mentioned it in her opening remarks, that we think there is a need for education. And I think that's a missing component. We're hopeful that the aspect of the business community may be able to provide that education to the folks that are the beneficiaries of this. So my comments are mostly not to flag that something is missing, but to flag that there are responsibilities that exist.
Got it. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
thank
much.
you.
With that, we will call up John Perry from Apple. Welcome.
Chair Solomon, Vice Chairman Finley, members of the committee. My name is John Perry. I am the Senior Manager for the Secure System Design team at Apple. My team is responsible for ensuring the hardware security of Apple devices globally. I am also a proud Oregonian, living in Northeast Portland and based in the Apple Beaverton office. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Apple supports a consumer's right to repair, and we have been vocal in our support of both state and federal legislation. We appreciate the opportunity to participate in the legislative process because it is absolutely critical that any legislation is crafted with protections for consumer security, safety, and privacy. The topic of repair is also personal to me. My grandfather was a TV repairman, and I myself began my career at Apple nearly 20 years ago as a genius at the Apple Store. I use the knowledge that I gained in helping customers get their devices repaired in my role as Apple's principal secure repair architect. I also work to ensure the security, safety, and privacy of over 2 billion device owners globally. And while the TVs that my grandfather repaired were central to a family's living room, they contain none of the personal information stored on today's smartphones, including financial information, family photos, biometric data, health data, and location history, just to name a few. Today's devices also contain components such as lithium batteries that can pose a safety risk to consumers if they are not designed with critical protections to prevent physical harm to device owners. Regulation must not compromise consumer protection. I'd like to begin by saying that Apple agrees with the vast majority of Senate Bill 1596. I have met with Chair Solomon several times and appreciate her willingness to engage in an open dialogue. Senate Bill 1596 is a step forward in making sure that the people of Oregon, myself included, can get their device repaired easily and cost effectively. However, it is our belief that the bill's current language around parts pairing will undermine the security, safety, and privacy of Oregonians by forcing device manufacturers to allow the use of parts of unknown origin in consumer devices. It is important to understand why Apple and other smartphone manufacturers use parts pairing. It is not to make repair more difficult. It is, in fact, to make access to repair easier while also making sure that your device and the data stored on it remain secure. Parts pairing also helps ensure the device's optimal performance and the safe operation of critical components like the battery after a repair. Apple's secure repair process is designed to allow a technician to diagnose and repair issues with the customer's device without requiring the customer to provide their passcode, which would allow access to their most sensitive data. The security of Apple's devices is designed so that no one at Apple or anywhere else can gain access to data without the device owner's passcode. This extends to our repair process as well. Replacing security components such as the Face ID or Touch ID sensor in a device should never allow someone to bypass the protection of the customer's passcode or biometrics. Under SB 1596 current parts pairing wording, Apple could be required to allow third-party biometric sensors to work in our devices without any form of authentication, which could lead to unauthorized access to an individual's personal data. This would be an incredible disservice to consumers not just in Oregon, but worldwide, as we have no ability to restrict provisions regionally. Apple's cloud-based repair process is designed to verify the authenticity and integrity of the critical security and safety hardware installed in the device. This helps to prevent potentially malicious components from compromising the device owner's safety, security, and privacy. Our process is designed to ensure the device also remains in compliance with regulatory requirements like the FCC's limits on electromagnetic radiation emissions enacted to protect the health and safety of all consumers. Apple is also deeply committed to reducing the environmental impact of our devices. I think we can all agree that the best repair is the repair you never need. And for this reason, we design our devices for longevity to withstand the test of time. We recognize that repair plays a key role in our longevity goals, and that when a device does need to be fixed, consumers should be able to seek repair when and where they need it. Many parts used in Apple devices require precise calibration to ensure customers enjoy consistent performance even after a repair. During manufacturing, Apple parts are calibrated one by one using large, complex, and often expensive calibration fixtures. Calibration data for these parts is stored securely on Apple's calibration servers. This allows consumers to re-download the data simply by restoring the software in their device, which can help avoid the need for a repair if the data is lost or damaged. This also enables a technician to replace a part and ensure the function is functioning optimally without the need to purchase expensive test equipment. Without this cloud-based calibration process, repair shops large and small would need to buy and deploy costly calibration fixtures on site to calibrate repaired devices. This would go against the goals of expanding access to and decreasing the cost of repair. It is because of our cloud-based calibration technology that Apple has been able to expand access to iPhone repair from our more than 500 retail locations to over 9,500 repair locations worldwide. This technology is also what allowed Apple to be the first in the industry to enable consumers to repair their own smartphones at home while using the same tools and services available to our first-party service providers. Since we launched the self-service repair program in 2022, Apple has streamlined the calibration process to make it easier for consumers performing their own repairs. Last year, the calibration process was updated so that it can be completed on device without the need to contact Apple or the self-service team to complete the calibration step. Repair access is an ongoing journey, and we're always looking for ways to make repair easier and more accessible for consumers and repair providers. My team, along with hardware and software engineering teams across Apple, continue to investigate how we can further reduce cost and increase access to repair for consumers, such as enabling the reuse of parts for the purpose of repair without compromising the consumer protections outlined here today, including preventing the reuse of parts taken from a lost or stolen device. We also continue to expand our support for third-party parts used in repair. In the case of a third-party part, Apple's calibration servers are not applicable. When a third-party part is installed in an Apple device, the device will attempt to activate the part and offer the best possible performance based on that part's capabilities. Consumers have the right to choose which parts they use for repair, provided the device transparently reflects the repair history and the use of the part does not pose a risk to consumers' safety, security, or privacy. Because when it comes to consumers, nothing is more important than that. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak today, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Chair Solomon, and thank you for coming to testify on this bill. And my concern with is security. I think it's a valid concern. Our lives are basically digital now that we have phones. It's my opinion, nobody's forced to buy an Apple phone. But my question is, from manufacturer's position, would this bill allow any entity, and my question posed to the AG was potentially coordinating with law enforcement, but would this bill allow any entity that the manufacturer doesn't have control over to get into data that they couldn't get to before this bill?
Thank you, Senator. Chair Solomon. The answer to your question is somewhat complicated. The wording under the parts pairing aspects of this legislation says that Apple would be required to allow parts that are not authorized or approved by the manufacturer. And our interpretation of that is that we could be forced to allow the use of third-party parts that we have no way of identifying or verifying the integrity of. An example would be like if you were to place the fingerprint sensor on a device with a sensor that is designed to bypass user security. Basically a fingerprint sensor is taking a photo of your finger and sending that to the system to match against, the one that you enrolled at the time that you first set up your biometrics. And a fingerprint sensor that is always sending the same image, right? The customer doesn't have a way to know that. And, very few people are handing their phone to someone else and saying, here, can you break into my phone, right? And so it's certainly feasible that, a customer could find themselves in a situation where they're using a sensor that is not actually taking an image of their fingerprint. The design of Apple's system is to try to prevent that from happening because we authenticate the sensor. We know it matches Apple's security requirements. We know that it's a sensor that we made and can be securely paired with the secure enclave in our devices that protects customer data. There was some third-party article recently, or independent journalist article in the last few months about this specific topic where not all fingerprint sensors are created equal, and some of them can be used to bypass, authentication. And so Apple works very hard to try to prevent that from happening. I am responsible, like I said, for the global security of Apple's platforms. And that is not just for citizens of Oregon. And there are many countries around the world that do not have the privacy and right to free speech and things like that. And so we design our devices so that, Apple nor anyone else can gain access to your data. And even the replacement of one of our biometric sensors will not allow access to data.
Thank you.
I'm just going to ask a little follow-up question to that. So are all parts within an Apple phone, are all of them paired?
No, they are not.
Okay. So I think I posed this before. Consumers can go on and repair certain aspects potentially of maybe an older phone or such. They have the ability to do that.
Yeah, there are many parts in your iPhone that are not paired.
Okay.
You know, speakers and other things.
Yeah.
You know, the only time we deliberately disable functionality on one of our devices with parts pairing is around biometric security. So the Touch ID sensor and the Face ID sensor will not work if it cannot be authenticated by the software.
You just made a comment to third-party parts and concerns for that, but there are parts that can be added to phones that are not paired that consumers can replace and can go online and
Today, you
purchase,
can buy a number
on certain phones
on every Apple phone. There are parts that you can repair that are not paired to the device.
that might be third-party parts. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. But okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for coming today. I do appreciate that Apple chose to be part of this conversation. Of all of this bill, all the elements, it seems like we've come down to parts pairing much more than any other aspect. There's alignment almost everywhere else. So I've tried to study parts pairing and I kind of understand it more than I used to. One question would be, in the process of trying to build consensus on this, Chair Solomon worked with a number of stakeholders and asked, basically made the point that there are issues around parts pairing that bear on the practical ability to repair. So it's important, it's central. And she asked a number of stakeholders, as I understand it, I did not attend those meetings, for language suggestions around revisions from 542 last session on parts pairing. My understanding is that some had some, and I believe some are reflected in the revisions. And the best from the documents I've seen, when Apple was asked, the only thing they said was delete this section. Don't speak to parts pairing. And my question is, that did not give you the opportunity to get comfortable with the bill because there were no revisions suggested that you could respond to. Did you have any other input other than delete this whole section?
So I'll be honest with you, Senator, I am not a legislative expert. I am Apple's technical expert, but I can tell you that, based on the information provided to me by our legislative experts, we looked at several options. I know we provided, red line versions of last year's bill to Senator Solomon's office. I personally don't know of language that we were comfortable with.
From what I've seen, your only comment was delete this section. And if that's not accurate, I hope you'd follow up and let me know.
I'm happy to get that answer for you.
Can I ask a couple more questions on parts pairing? So I actually have material from a constituent who is way smarter in this space than I am, trying to understand your concerns with parts pairing. And I want to kind of apply it to a couple particular phrases in the bill. So the question is, does Apple use parts pairing to, quoting from the bill, prevent or inhibit an independent repair provider or an owner from installing or enabling the function of a replacement part?
No, sir.
Does Apple use parts pairing to reduce the functionality or performance of consumer electronic equipment?
So the software that Apple uses for parts pairing does not deliberately disable performance. There's a lot of nuance to that question. An example would be lithium battery technology. Lithium batteries are very complicated. They store a lot of energy very densely, and there's a lot of safety hardware that goes into the charging and discharging of those batteries in a safe way. Batteries also can chemically age very quickly if they are held at a high charge for a long period of time at high temperatures. And Apple batteries provide a whole bunch of telemetry from the battery to the system, which adjusts the performance of the system in order to prevent the chemical aging of the battery and hopefully push off how quickly the battery has to be replaced. Because the goal, as I said before, is longevity. We want customers to get the most use out of their device for as long as possible without the need for a repair. But a battery is a consumable part. And in this particular instance, to your question, third-party batteries often do not have the necessary hardware to provide that telemetry data to the system. And as a side effect to that, customers may experience a reduction in performance, but that is not because we're deliberately slowing down the phone. It's because the hardware is not capable of providing the data.
Is it fair for me to say that Apple doesn't use parts pairing to reduce functionality any more than necessary to keep the device operating?
That's correct. Okay. As I said before, the only place we deliberately disable functionality is around the biometric sensors.
And last question, does Apple use parts pairing to, quoting again, cause consumer electronic equipment to display unnecessary or misleading alerts or warnings about unidentified parts?
So we do display warning messages to customers about parts that we cannot identify, particularly for things like battery. There's an independent report that was released, I believe, in the last year that shows that 90% of lithium batteries on the market that did not come from the original equipment manufacturer lack safety compliance hardware in order to be compliant with industry standards.
So I'm quoting from the words of the bill. Can I safely say Apple does not cause consumer electronic equipment to display unnecessary or misleading alerts or warnings about unidentified parts?
So I would define the messaging that we display as relatively benign. It's not making any kind of statements about the quality.
Not misleading or unnecessary.
Yeah, it just simply says, we could not verify that this is an Apple battery, as a way of, making sure customers understand what they're getting and that they have the opportunity to have a conversation with the service provider to ensure that the battery used in that repair was safe. And the reason that we do all of these things, all of the consumer protections that we have in our repair process, are directly related to some negative experience that a customer was having as a result of repair.
So it would be a necessary message, not an unnecessary.
From my point of view, yes, sir.
Okay. So I guess the point my constituent is making, if you're doing all that, you are within the sideboards of the wording of this bill. And the bottom line question is, why would you object to this bill, to the parts pairing part of this bill? I think that's a lot of what us would really like to
Again,
know
and I
versus-
completely acknowledge that the bill does not outlaw parts pairing, right? I mean, I think we can continue to do what we do within our own service provider networks unrestricted. The concern that we have is that the language as written also says that we have to allow the use of parts unknown to us. And that goes beyond what we currently do with our own service provider networks. As Chair Solomon said in her opening remarks, the goal of this was to create parity between what we provide to our own service providers for consumers and third-party service providers that don't have a business arrangement with Apple. And I agree that the language does not preclude us from continuing to do what we're doing with our own service providers, but it does require us to go a step beyond that and to support hardware that we do not know anything about. And that's where I think the consumer risk comes into play.
Again, I appreciate your appearing. Madam Chair, I need to deliver some testimony down the hall a little bit. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, John. It's nice to see you again. And I want to say, thank you to Apple. You have always made yourself available to me to answer questions, and you've continued to do so. And I also really appreciate you appearing here today. So I think that Senator Golden also had a few of sort of my questions as well. I'm trying to understand, it feels like there are some parts that it might not matter whether or not it is a part that you made or a part that someone else made. For example, this little thing breaks on my phone all the time, right? And it doesn't matter because it's not, the functionality of the phone is, unless the camera is damaged, right? Nothing matters on that. Is that right?
Correct.
Does that matter to
So,
you?
well, there are a lot of things with our devices that might seem like they don't matter, but for instance, the back glass on your phone has the inductive charging coil attached to it. And there are a lot of safety precautions that have to go into the performance of the inductive charging coil to make sure that if some piece of metal is stuck between your phone and the charger, that doesn't overheat and potentially cause a safety issue.
So I get that, but you're allowed to figure out if the part that you're still allowed to use parts pairing is what I'm trying to understand.
Correct.
So is there some other, is there some way to write this that would allow you, I mean, it feels like we're saying you can't use an original manufacturer may not use parts pairing to do these things. Would you rather have us say you can use parts pairing to do these things? Like, I'm trying to understand your objection.
Again, I am definitely not a legislative expert. My mother is a paralegal, so I can kind of speak lawyer. But
just from the womb, how did that work?
But I will say, from my perspective, there are no consumer protections called out in the parts pairing law, right? Like as it's written. And, we have a number of consumer protections in our process that are designed to keep customers safe and secure. And I don't think the current wording allows for any exceptions to the policy.
Okay. So perhaps wording to have some consumer protection for things that may cause you great harm might be something that you could put in.
I wouldn't be able to put that in, but I would be happy to review it.
So, yeah, Google makes phones, correct?
I believe so.
And Google also has on their phones, they've got private information.
Yes.
And they use batteries that can cause, the thing to overheat and all that stuff. Is that right?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. So Google's, and I only I'm trying to prepare, I'm not trying to pit Apple against Google, but the fact of the matter is Google has come in here and has said that this parts pairing language is not something that bothers them, that they can manage through the security issues and the issues with safety. And so why is Apple different? Like, why is Apple different than what Google is doing?
I am not an expert on Google's repair policies or why they make the choices that they do. I do know that they require a pairing of their biometric sensors to their devices.
We're not preventing you from doing that in this
yes,
bill.
I mean, they do a similar process that we do. I think the reason that we have the protections that we do, and we've taken the stance that we have, is in direct result of customer harm in the repair process. Like, customers were experiencing an increase in battery thermal events, and a lot of the batteries on the market today, fail basic safety checks. Apple actually is required to meet certain UL standards in order to commercialize our devices across the world. And third-party battery manufacturers are not required to meet those same standards in order to commercialize their batteries. And the reason that we have the messaging that we do and we pair the batteries to our devices is specifically because, customers were receiving batteries, in some cases they thought were genuine because they bear the Apple logo. And then that resulted in a certain...
You actually, in your general thing, you keep track. I can keep track and look at my phone and know when it's been repaired, whether there's a genuine part in it or not. I can actually do that under general. Like, if I look in here, I can tell that. Is that correct?
So, but our understanding of the current parts pairing language in this bill would prevent us from displaying those messages and warnings to customers.
It would prevent it from you. If it's a necessary message, you can put it in there and then it would go in my history. And then I would know if this used phone could look to see whether or not it had a genuine part or not in it.
So again, I believe those messages to be necessary, but I don't know that anyone else interpreting the language would think that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Senator Finley because I sincerely appreciate that you're here and answering this. You don't know how much I appreciate. And so I really want to go, but I do want to offer just the students that have showed up. So I'm going to offer their time too. So go to Senator Finley and then we'll hear from the students. We can say just a few extra minutes. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll attempt to be brief.
Okay.
First of all, thank you, sir, for coming. I truly appreciate you showing up. We had a conversation the other day. You said something that you didn't tell me the other day, and that's that 90% of these off the market or third party batteries could have a cool new term, a thermal event. It's a nice way of saying
I'm about to have a thermal event. No, I'm kidding. That's different. That's different.
It's like a Tesla. So, the thermal event. So, without parts pairing, so you can pair some diode and resistor, and I don't want to know any more technical than that, with the battery. You don't know whether the battery operating that phone will become a thermal event or it will last and charge and give you a life cycle stuff.
That's correct.
So you need parts pairing to do that, and that is a significant safety factor.
So I will say that Apple does not actually do anything to limit the use of third-party batteries in our devices. If you put a third-party battery in the device, it will charge to the best capabilities of that battery. It will discharge the best possible capabilities of that battery. The only side effect to installing a third-party battery in an iPhone today is the warning message that tells you that it is not a genuine Apple battery. And the battery health information is not reported because third-party batteries often misrepresent the battery health information or just don't provide it to the system. And so we thought it was a better customer experience to not have that behave erratically. But other than that, there are no negative side effects to using a genuine Apple battery. If it's providing the right telemetry to the system, it will work as expected. The pairing that we do is strictly around the messages so that we can authenticate the battery and make an attempt to make sure that it is a genuine Apple battery. We actually know that many third-party batteries are reworked Apple batteries that do not have an Apple cell and may not have all the safety protections of an Apple battery, which is one of the reasons that we don't allow those batteries to be reused across devices.
In the interest of time, I'll leave it at that.
Sure.
Yeah.
This opportunity.
I'll call it.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. In the interest of time, I'm going to just go to our youth voices so that we can hear from our youth really quickly. Is it Lucia or Lucia? Lucia Donovan. And so, okay. Miles Metzger and Eliza Appleyard. Appreciate it. Come down real quickly. And I appreciate you being here today. And I wanted to make sure that I appreciate my colleagues, taking a little extra time so we could hear your testimony.
Thank you. Chair Solomon, Vice Chair Finley, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Lucia Donovan, and I'm a senior at Ida B. Wells High School. You may remember me from last year when I testified as a student voice about bringing communities together to address climate change. I certainly remember you, Senator Finley, because you took a good photo of me from the dais, a photo that almost made it onto our Christmas card. This bill is an opportunity to help young people living in rural Oregon. I know that rural kids have cell phones just like urban kids, and they break their phones just like we do. It's my hope that Senate Bill 1596 will provide all Oregonians, especially rural Oregonians, access to parts, tools, and instructions to repair their devices. I'm fortunate to live in a place where I can take my Chromebook to U-Break iFix when it malfunctions. It's less than 3 miles away from my house. But if I was a student in Crane, the closest repair store is over 30 miles away in Burns. Then there's only one, and it might be expensive. Wouldn't it be great if they could fix their devices on their own? Technology is essential in our classrooms. I use my Chromebook to do almost all my schoolwork. I use it to take notes and to catch up when I miss school to run around the state capitol. Since the switch to virtual schooling, teachers and students have adapted to doing almost everything online. Research for an essay is done most productively on the web. Every assignment is typed up because teachers don't want to read students' handwriting. And when we go to college, we'll have lectures that we watch through Google Classroom. We have a world of knowledge at our fingertips, and we're using it successfully for education. To provide an exceptional education for students throughout all of Oregon, we need to ensure that they can use the right technology. That's how we create a strong, well-educated future for Oregon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair Solomon, Vice Chair Finley, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Eliza Appleyard, and I'm a senior at Ida B. Wells High School. Our world is an ever-growing and changing place, and so is our environment. Many think it is too late to save the planet, and if we don't do something soon, they may be right. So I'm asking you to take the small step of voting in support of Senate Bill 1596 to help the future of all Oregonians. As a result of the difficulty of getting devices repaired, many Oregonians are forced to buy new products and throw their old ones away. This creates electronic waste, which is one of the fastest growing types of waste in our country. The average lifespan of a cell phone is around 2.5 years, and there are approximately 508,000 Oregonians aged 10 to 19. If their phones each last 2.5 years, during a 9-year period, they'd go through 1,828,800 phones. If they can make their phones last just one more year, they'd go through 1,306,284 phones. That's a difference of 522,514 phones, meaning that many phones wouldn't be thrown away. Assuming those 522,514 phones are 1 centimeter thick, we could stack them all on top of each other, each facing up, and the resulting stack would reach from the ground to the very top of the Goldman 105 times.
Wow.
Making repairs more widely available to all Oregonians through the right to repair will reduce the need for new products, which in turn will decrease the pollution created by electronic manufacturing and the e-waste produced from the 4,800 phones that get thrown away every day in Oregon. Overall, for the future of my generation and the generations to come, we need to take this important step in finding a solution before there isn't one. Thank you.
Chair Solomon, Vice Chair Finley, and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Miles Mester, and I'm a senior at IB Wells High School. I want to articulate why this committee should vote in support of Senate Bill 1596 by first highlighting my friend Simon. My friend Simon works hard in school, sports, and at work. He bought himself a new iPhone a couple years back because before it was pickpocketed from him on vacation. He was able to pay for a used iPhone on the internet, but like so many, he dropped it while running, and it hasn't been able to do anything about its broken internals since. Phones are our daily connector for information gathering and networking with people. It's how we get by today. As a result, our society is dangerously dependent on the handful of corporations that develop this technology. Senate Bill 1596 is a counter to that trend of increasing control that big tech has. The bill puts power in the skills of citizens and small businesses. It allows smart people like my friend Simon to take technological issues into their own hands by simply having these corporations provide the necessary information. And while we still debate national issues like data privacy and screen addiction, let's change this producer-consumer relationship by at least giving Oregonians the right to repair the devices. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any questions or comments for our youth?
How about, wow.
Wow.
Yeah, well done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Really appreciate you taking the time to be
Thank
here
you.
and having your voice be heard. So with that, folks, I'm going to carry over the continuation of this conversation for Senate Bill 1596 because we did not hear all the testimony. And then we're going to carry over the Senate Bill 1581 to Tuesday's hearing as well. So with that, I'm going to close this session for today. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have to help you?
Nope, you're good. Just,
Okay.
just
So here's what's super fascinating about this, folks. The hearing itself has actually ended. And what has happened with the carryovers, that means that presumably I'll get asked to testify on Tuesday instead. This is super interesting. There's a couple of theories about what just happened here. One of those things is that possibly it was a question about whether or not people were taking a lot of time from those OEMs, specifically Apple, taking up a lot of time to maybe make it so that more folk couldn't have an opportunity to testify. If I was going to say any one thing right now, and if I get the chance to, of course, on Tuesday, I think I'll probably say this. I remember some of the testimony from earlier in that hearing. One of the things someone said was, it's really important to protect intellectual property. There's a lot of people who innovate, and their blood, their time, their tears, their treasure is tied up in making sure that they're able to bring their ideas to market and see them properly compensated. I love that point. And when I looked around that room, that hearing, the folks that were assembled to testify, what I saw, and especially because I can see the list of the rest of the people who were there to testify, what I saw was that every single person who was in that hearing who runs a small business was there in support of that bill. Every single person there who runs a small company in that room, who has blood, tears, and treasure tied up in bringing a product or a service to the market, was all there in support of right to repair. And that is a really powerful message. I plan to expand on that certainly next Tuesday, especially because it's my understanding that a couple of folk from Google and a few other people would like to have a word with the committee about it. I hope I get the opportunity to do so. I'm a 5th generation Oregonian, and it means a lot to me to be able to support in my home state the kinds of workforce and innovation rights that I think I experienced when I was growing up in Oregon, as opposed to what we're seeing right now. Honestly, the only 2 businesses I've ever personally seen affected by this right to repair conversation are 2 women-owned phone repair companies that went out of business when the OEMs, when Apple, really, it was Apple, started shutting down the ability to do third-party phone repairs. I think that says an awful lot. I want to see that support improve in future. And honestly, I think the people that need to see some competition here are people that aren't having their ideas challenged more than anything else. That's the thing I'd like to see happen. I'll talk a little bit more about it next Tuesday. Hopefully, if they invite me back, that'd be great. And if not, I promise you right now, we're going to grab some of those folks. For those of us who serve MSPs, for those of us who serve service providers for small businesses, I think there are a lot of really interesting questions about the responsibilities and rights about those of us who are repairing devices, servicing computers, and servicing the devices that small businesses are using. And I think I'd like to have a conversation with somebody on that topic. I think I'll bring some of that up later on. Folks, thanks so much. I'm going to talk to you again hopefully this next Tuesday. As always,